because um and I like how you said, I like how you brought up children of the 80s. We have a kind of especially African American children of the 80s. And I
You
grew I
scared of them people out there.
yeah. I mean, I grew up in a bad neighborhood. I grew up in a number of bad neighborhoods, African American, inner city, bad neighborhoods that were
Mm-hmm.
inundated by the crack era.
Mm.
And our thought processes in a neighborhood became different from what our parents were. You know, I often talk to
Mm.
my parents about the neighborhood and they talk glowingly about it. And I'm just like, I don't remember anything really glowing about our neighborhood outside of my friends, right? It was just
Right.
it was almost like an exercise watching the deterioration of the African American neighborhood through many different things, from drugs to desegregation to
Mm-hmm.
just people moving out to better places. And I read this book called Disintegration that I know you personally, so I just tell you about it when I see you. But the book in
Okay.
Disintegration talked about how desegregation was a catalyst for moving out of the hoods, right? The neighborhoods
Mm-hmm.
that we were segregated to and had to make work. But I like how you brought up the idea of um, being involved in the revitalization. And I think, I think that's where a lot of African American, um, we are not used to being a part of the revitalization.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to being victims of the revitalization, which is the gentrification. We're used to coming in after it has been
Yeah.
revitalized,
Yeah.
and that is one of the things that um, me myself and the group I work with, Community Renewal and Allendale Strong, we are in the process of trying to teach people how to get in front of the revitalization, how to not gentrify but revitalize
Right.
our neighborhoods. And you know, we went through trauma. We went through trauma, right? Racial trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The system gave us trauma, right? I always say that it's funny how if you look at this heroin epidemic versus the heroin epidemic in the 70s, how when it was just Black people going through the heroin epidemic after the Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm.
you had them throwing people in jail. It was
It was a
like,
moral flaw.
yeah, it
They
was
looked
like,
at, yeah.
yeah, there you go. They were like, oh my God, they're drug addicts. Throw them in jail. Throw the dealer in jail. Throw the drug addict in jail. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
happens during the crack epidemic. But now with this new heroin epidemic, they're literally giving them places to use the heroin.
Yeah.
So the process, we're used to being victims of the process and not being in front of the process, not the one initiating the process.
Right.
So what that's why I wanted you to tell your story, because your
Sure.
story, and you always tell me, man, I stumbled into this, but you're not stumbling through it. And that's what I like. That's the reason I wanted you to tell your story to the people, because you may have stumbled into it, but you're not stumbling through it.
It has
And
been a learning experience.
oh yeah, and your knowledge, I think your knowledge needs to be passed along to other people. Your
Mm.
experiences need to be passed along to other people, because African Americans need to understand what and how to revitalize. We need to understand
Yeah.
it's not, I see a lot of us chasing the past. We're chasing a time when we were segregated, but not understanding that the only reason that worked is because we had to make it work.
Right. Right.
And now we have a choice. We can either do what I would even say, do what I did, right? I went and I found a good neighborhood far away from the city in the
Hmm.
suburbs. And boom, that's what I did. I was like, I'm buying a house. We can afford our house, but we couldn't
Hmm.
over afford our house.
Mm.
And that's another key thing that I believe that you did that that needs to be passed along. Over affording your home.
Yeah.
So
I
go ahead, go ahead.
when we purchased the home, that was something that we just realized I don't want to be in a situation where I end up paying so much to the point where we're struggling to just make sure everything we meet everything at the end of the month. And really the only way I was able to be aware of what I could effectively afford was because of that knocker program. and and it wasn't just like the program, it was they helped me establish a budget and understand, like, you might think you have this amount of money, but because of, you're paying for internet every month, you're paying for these utilities every month. If you buy a house, you need to be aware these are the things you're going to have to purchase. Homeowners association, yeah, that was one of the things I decided I was staying away from. But garbage removal, all that, like, I didn't have the understanding because we had lived in apartments. When I was living, with my family, I was initially living in apartments, and then we moved to, like I said, South Carolina, and a lot of that didn't apply because when we were living in South Carolina, it was with my grandmother, and she flat out owns her home because
Mhm.
she's been around for a while. So there were very few things that had to be paid for. But it wasn't until, like, I really was pushing out on my own. I was like, oh, this is adult stuff. I don't know about this.
Adulting
So
101.
yeah, and this is stuff I should have learned well before this, but that really helped out because just being aware of where you are financially, and like, it's all right if you have to sacrifice some things, but, like, your health and your mental stability should not come at the cost, or you shouldn't have to give those up just to be able to afford a home. And you have to start to reevaluate, what is it you really need out of a home. Like, do you need a home that's a super huge McMansion, or do you need a home that'll meet your family's needs? And this going back to, like, what advice would I give? That's one of the biggest things that I would say is make sure you evaluate and understand what you need versus what you want. And if you
Mm.
could find something in the middle, that's spectacular. But I think the housing issue that we ran into years ago was based around, what do I want? There's a whole lot of other things that contributed to it, but um, oh, and one more thing. I think you kind of touched on this already. Um, One thing that's been coming to me lately that I think we have to, as a culture, change our minds about is very often we look at success coming from impoverished areas as I made it out. Very often, like, that is a perspective that we as a culture have, like we're making it out of this area. But very infrequently do we have people thinking about the process of making it out is good, but what does it take to make the neighborhood? And that is a lot of what I hear in the things you've been describing. And is that takes more political capital than one person has. But that is something that we have to consider as a culture is, do we need to make it out, or do we need to make our neighborhoods? And that's, like I said, that's often larger than one person. But understand that improving a neighborhood very often will make it viable to other people. Um, so that's my thought process on the gentrification thing. So I think it's like, keep that in the back of your head, but also do what you can for you and your family. I'm sorry, something's ringing here.
Yeah, man, that was eloquent. That was eloquent. I like how you jumped on that topic, because we do celebrate making it out when we should be, like you said, looking within, trying
Mm,
to improve our neighborhood, trying to improve our situation in our neighborhoods. And and really, that's one of the things that we at Allendale Strong are trying to make happen, right? One of the things that we tell people is that you have to take stock of what you have and what you have the ability to change. And it takes a village. It takes a
right,
neighborhood
right,
to
right.
do it. Like you said, not one person has that political capital to be able to do it by themselves. But you have to understand the you have to be able to understand what you're going to get in the end.
Mm,
The prize at the end is really, and we talked about, man, I really, we can just keep talking, because this topic keeps growing and growing and growing. And hopefully I can probably have you on a panel, and we can really try to break down the whole thought process in revitalizing a neighborhood.
mhm.
Because I like I said earlier, I think your experience, just in this, just being in front of gentrification, being a part of revitalization of a neighborhood, and being able to reap the benefits of it, right? You
Yeah,
have options where other people that are African American, staying in a neighborhood that's been gentrified, don't have options.
right, right.
And that to me, is what we need to, like you said, it's time for us to stop celebrating making it out, and start celebrating improving the neighborhood around us. So
Hmm.
um, don't hang up, don't hang up yet, but I'm gonna go ahead
Okay.
and close out. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. And I want to thank you, man, for coming on.
This has been a pleasure. I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you.